Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I am here with a friend of mine. I'm officially allowed to call you friend after you've been on the air before, right, Harold?
That's right.
We have Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, also known as the Dynamic Deacon. He is a little bit humble. He said that wasn't the name he gave himself. That's what the ladies at the church gave you because you are dynamic at speaking. So I will compliment you so you don't have to compliment yourself. So thank you so much for being on the air with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Christine. This is awesome. It's actually be with you again.
I know.
Because this is my second time on your show.
Second time, but this time we get our listeners get to see us, so they're viewers instead of just listening to us, right? So they can see why you're dynamic. Well, I've been doing this series on, I've called it two things, racism in black and white and conversations on race in America. They're both the same thing. You know, I think about it back, 100 years ago, the problem, we had slaves. So a tangible thing was stop slavery. Then we had unfair, working. We wouldn't allow our black brothers and sisters to get jobs. So we had to change the laws. And they progressed, and then same education. And then, I watched the movie Selma, and we had to get proper voting rights back in the 60s. So as a white person who is not a racist, I don't care what people call me, I don't care what unspoken biases we all have, which we all have blind spots, black and white. I'm not a racist, but I still know it exists, and I still want to know, what can I do? Because all my black friends, the first person I had on the show was a really great friend of mine, and she's a business owner, black business owner, had a 3-star general. He's also black in the Army. And I was like, okay, I get it. I get your point about what's being said, but what can I do? You're not giving me any actionable principles. You're just saying, oh, it exists. Well, like, what do you want me to do? Change a law? Stand on my head? I need to know something to do. And I think the point finally started coming through. People want to change and fix the problem, but we need to know what to do. And so my part is I've spoken to the Lord, and I'm like, you know what I can do? I can have conversations with all my black brothers and sisters of different standing, Protestants, Catholics, men, women, business owners, street cleaners. I talked to some people with black skin who clean the streets, and I asked them the same questions about racism. So that's my part, is I thought, Deacon, if we can hear voices, that's the best part in just making ourselves better people, right? Speak the truth in love and go off and, make disciples of all the nations. Am I off on that, or does that seem like a good starting place, or is that the end zone, or is that, what more can go on?
No, I think what you're doing is exactly the track that we need to take, and not enough of that is going on, quite frankly. So you're right up. You're going right in the right direction. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, let me ask you my first question. Okay, well, actually, I didn't tell my listeners, viewers. I'm so used to saying just listeners now that I've got this YouTube channel. You are a Catholic deacon, a father of 5, if I remember. How many kids you got?
Yeah, 4.
4. See, maybe that's a God thing. Maybe you need another. Tell it to your wife, right? Oh my goodness. So you are at what parish? Aren't you in Oregon?
Yeah, Immaculate Heart of Mary in Portland, Oregon.
And you've been there how many years?
In Portland, about 23 years now. I'm actually originally from Barbados, born in the West Indies, and but we immigrated to the United States, so I grew up in New Jersey.
Oh, wow. How'd you get out there then?
My wife's from Oregon. So
there you go. Good marriage right there. Yeah. So that's even better. You've lived in the West Indies, you've lived in Jersey, East Coast, West Coast. Let me just ask you, as a Catholic man, as a man, or as a black man, or all three, because you are all three, what is your perception on race in America today?
Well, I think people thought that the problem was pretty much going to be over when a black president was elected. Oh, see, we've gotten past all this now. But there's always been this undercurrent, and it goes all the way back to the Bible. And as long as there are people that are different from ourselves, as long as we continue to fear what we don't understand, we're going to have these kinds of problems in our country and in our world. Martin Luther King said so many years ago when he accepted the Nobel Prize that in order to resolve racism, we have to, first of all, we have to reject revenge, aggression, and retaliation. And he said the foundation of such a method is love, which resonates very well for us as people of faith, as Catholics, because in First John's letter, chapter 4, verse 16 says that God is love, and he who lives in love lives in God, and God lives in him. So racial injustice and prejudice are antithetical to love and freedom and peace and all the things that we preach and all the principles of Catholic social justice as well. But before I go on, I want to make a distinction between prejudice and racism, if I could.
Okay, please.
So prejudice is, with regard to race, is a preconceived notion about someone that's not based on any factual or objective experience. So, for example, before COVID, when I was still traveling quite a bit, I was at a parish in January, and a person there found that I went to Notre Dame for undergrad, and he says, "Oh, you went to Notre Dame. What position did you play?" Now, he just assumed because I'm a large Black man that went to Notre Dame that I played football. When the truth is, I've never played football in my life. My high school didn't even have football. I went to a small Benedictine high school in Newark, New Jersey called St. Benedict's Prep. I wrestled for 4 years in high school, but I had an academic scholarship to Notre Dame. So the question he should have asked me was, "Oh, what did you study? What was your major?" Because that's what he would have asked anybody else. You see, so that statement itself is prejudice, but it's not necessarily racist. So racism is prejudice or discrimination, as I just described it, with the added element that you believe that your race is superior to another person's race. So the reason why I'm holding these prejudiced opinions and biased opinions is because I believe that my race is superior to your race. So that's the distinction I want to make there between prejudice and racism.
That's a good distinction. That helps with the conversations that have been going on first and foremost.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes people confuse those two things. But the racist piece. So for example, the obvious examples, right? The KKK and white supremacist groups and things like that would be overtly racist because they have those biases and prejudices, but they also believe that their race is superior.
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic distinction. I wish I'd have thought to go there in the first place, because I think that's what every good white person's been trying to, iterate. It's like, I'm not racist, but yeah, we do have blind spots. Maybe I've made comments like that. My girlfriend in this series that I've been doing, Dr. Jessica McLeish, she's white and she's married to a Black man. And she said comments in front of her mother-in-law that were perfectly fine for her as a white person. And she just so funny, on the air she was talking, she'd say something, I think, about Aunt Jemima, the syrup conversation was going on, and her mother-in-law and all the other Black family members looked at her like, "How could you say that?" She's like, what I say, right? She's a redheaded white person. And they're like, "Well, that comment is not perceived well by Black folks." And she's like, "Why? Explain." So there was obviously no ill intention there. And her family helped her come in. And that's what, she was helping us to see is, oh, okay, from your lived experience. Because for me, for instance, that Aunt Jemima thing, I was really annoyed by that. I thought, you get this beautiful Black face, a nice product. I mean, it's the only syrup I buy, as a matter of fact, because I get the butter in it too. But I'm like, why are you changing it? To me, taking her image off of syrup and replacing it with a nondescript something, that to me that seemed negative, until some of my Black friends said no, because many people are used the term Aunt Jemima as a pejorative phrase, as a word. And I was like, oh, because I never did, but I see it. So it's this education of, so I think what I'm getting at, this, Deacon, is that as a Catholic, we will misspeak, but not out of negative intent, out of sometimes lack of knowledge. My job is to choose whether or not I should take offense by it. When you spoke to me, am I going to give you the benefit of the doubt and think, were you trying to hurt me? Were you trying to be negative? Or was it something like the Aunt Jemima comment that Jessica McLeese made. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and that's the thing. I mean, when you look at, well, where did these things come from? Think about it, because little kids aren't racist at all.
Mm-mm.
You look at little 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds playing on the playground. They don't care black, white. They could care less.
Nope.
They're just
You're
playing
right.
together. But when they get older, they start to separate into groups. And what causes that? Well, things like jokes and things we consume images and sound bites from television and movies and social media and products. Um, each and of themselves individually is not necessarily bad, but when you look at the collective thing, so for example, we see a movie like Glory with Denzel Washington, which talked about slavery, or movies like Abraham Lincoln, which had slavery. See, those are historical narratives that talk about something that really happened, not bad in and of itself. But if you continually see those images, the Aunt Jemima, and then you have the joke associated with the image, all you see is black people as slaves or as pimps or as drug dealers or as murderers or as gang members over and over and over again,
Right.
without any reinforcing positive images. For example, when I was a kid, the Cosby Show was very
Just gonna
popular.
bring
Here
that up.
you had the husband who was a physician and the wife who was an attorney. Successful, strong family, black family.
Yes. Good looking and
Unless you have the
cohesive. Yes.
parallel there, you're going to have what happens is you start to form these even subliminally, these images and these half truths start to form your mind and your heart and your opinion. Well, if I see these images so many times, then somehow it must be true, or somehow that's the way it is. And that can cause people fear. For example, I was in Chicago a couple of years ago speaking at a large conference, 5,000 people. And I was dressed in a suit and a tie, and I had a crucifix on, and I had a deacon pin, and I walk into an elevator, and the only other person in the elevator was this petite white woman. I smiled and nodded at her, like to acknowledge hello. And her eyes got really big. She backed up to the back of the elevator and grabbed her purse and held it close to her body. And oh no, she's scared. So I didn't say anything. I just turned around, and the doors of the elevator closed right in front of me. I pushed my floor, didn't say anything to her, got to my floor and walked away. Now, the question asked is, why was she afraid of me? Now, I understand that something may have happened to her in the past, and she may have been traumatized. I get
Right.
that. But I had nothing to do with that. And in fact, I even smiled and nodded and acknowledged her when I got in the elevator. But why was she afraid of me? And because sometimes people see me, I've even had people cross the street. They see me and they get afraid. Again, we fear what we don't understand. The truth is, I'm a big old teddy bear. you know?
Right.
But when they see me, they get fear. And that, after a while, Chris, I got to tell you, that hurts.
I know.
That hurts. If that happens to you enough times,
It does hurt.
why can't people see me? Not this, the exterior, but to see me, to see my heart, to see who I am. And we have to get past this barrier of race in order to really see people the way God sees them, to look at someone through God's eyes. And that's where we need to get to.
And you know what, when you're speaking that and giving me that example, I think of something that white people will say a lot. And, if this sounds offensive, know that I'm just speaking a truth that I know. When people are talking about, I don't know, let me think, I don't even know what subject, if we're talking about prison or something. Not even. Here's the example. Well, what if your daughter was raped? And what if it's a big old black man? And I've heard people say that. And I don't know if I ever contributed to that. I don't want to be a liar. I don't know if I have. I don't think I have, because I know the mother who raised me. But I know what I do now, and what I've done for years is I'll look and say, well, is it any better if she's raped by a big old white man? Because they don't even catch that they're bringing color up as if it's a prejudice to them. But it is, because rape is the trauma, not the color of the man
Yes.
who's raping the child.
Yes.
And yet they see that as the most negative thing. And until you challenge that, you're like, is it better to be raped by a white man? Well, you know what I mean. I'm like, I do know what you mean, but I have to challenge you, because you need to recognize that you have just made white man here, black man here in that one statement. And I think that's the kind of thing that people need to do constantly. Not to judge, not to hurt, not to start a fight, but just to go, let me call you out on what you just said, to make us aware of it.
This gets back to my point, because you're right. And I was in law enforcement for 23 years. And so, yes, I mean, I've investigated numerous rapes. And people of all persuasions, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. There was even one guy that was from India, not Native American, but actually from India, the country of India. And, so all over the spectrum. But why is it that in your example that you gave, Dr. Christine, that in some, when they think of rape, they think big Black guy. Why is it that's the first image that comes to their mind? Because of these stereotypical images that are portrayed over and over and over again in movies, in television, on the news every night, in networks, all these different things. And so again, you start to build, even again, just subliminally, interiorly, you get this idea that, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm digesting this, I'm consuming this. This is forming,
thoughts, beliefs
in my heart. And so therefore I have to, when I see someone, I'm reacting to these
images, these messages.
I'm consuming the messages even over years of time. And that happens not just Black, but with any race at all, whether it's Native American, whether it's Asian, whether it's Hispanic. I think each of us to some extent have biases and prejudices, but are not necessarily overtly racist.
Right. And there's this one test that I've given my students on in my communication courses, and I wish I could remember to tell the link here, but it's a test you take, and it's more of a quickly answer this test on time. And it's like, oh, there's white person, Black person, something happening. And then you click on who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. And even Black people will gauge, if you have to guess real quickly, oh, the Black guy's a bad guy. So it's not about me wanting to, it's like everybody, oh, I'm programmed to think that. And you are so right, Deacon. It is the media we consume, because even if we get off the issue of race and we talk about marriage, and I talk about how society has morally just gotten bankrupt, well, what do you see on TV? How many happily married couples of any color do you see on TV? When people are having sex, which shouldn't be on TV, but you always see sex between unmarried people is hot and passionate, and then when they're married, the images you see are rolled eyes or people making sarcastic remarks and stuff like that. And so I go, there is no role model that waiting to get married is happy and sex is hot. And so when I challenge my students on that, or they'll say to me in class, like, well, of course you can have sex before you get married. Who doesn't? And I'm like, so many people don't. It's the TV you're watching. And so it is the same things we do with race. I love marriage. And so, like, one of my favorite shows right now is funny for this conversation too. Do you ever watch Blackish?
No, I don't watch. I rarely watch television. Actually,
ever really turn the TV on at all. But actually, it's never on until evening. But I don't even know what night it comes on. But when it's on, that's one only show my husband and I will watch together. It is just like the Huxtables of what was that, the 80s that was on?
Yeah, I think it's the 80s, 90s,
yeah, it is just so funny. But what they do is I'd encourage you to watch the show at least once or twice. It's a series. Diana Ross's daughter is the lead. The husband's funny. I don't know the actors' names, but they hit race in a head-on kind of way that doesn't attack white people, but kind of points it out. But it's just such a funny show. But they're a wholesome family. They've done shows where the wife, when she was pregnant with their 5th child, right there, as a Catholic, the biases we have to face when we have big families. If you have more than your 2.1 kids, they think your intellectual level is lower, and oh, you're one of those dumb people who go by faith. Anyway, so they have 5 children, so they've dealt with that, and they were dealing a whole issue on what to name the baby. And the husband wanted to name the baby like Keyshawn or something like that, and she wanted to name him James or something. She said, come on, he's a Black child. You can't name him a Black name, or he's going to have that bias against him right up front. So let's not do this. So the whole show was about, does it exist, does it not? They sent out resumes. Look, I did this same resume with this name. and this resume with a fake white name, and this one got hits and this one didn't. So for white people to watch that show, Deacon, I think it opened up a lot of eyes. And to me, that's one of the best ways to deal with racism in America. If fight fire with fire, instead of the TV that shows, the dark sides, or blacks only as thugs, or womanizers, or whatever. Show what you said earlier. Show another Huxtable kind of family, because they're out there. I mean, your family's out there, right? I mean,
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So my wife is Irish and German. Yeah. So.
Oh, is your wife white?
Yeah.
See, yep. So you understand that as well. You must have some great conversations.
Oh, we do, and we joke about it and things like that. And there's only been a few times where it's been overtly, an issue. For example, we were first married. We were at a wedding of a college friend of mine in Georgetown, in Washington D.C. And we're walking down the street and people are yelling. That's at the movie Jungle Fever is out. Jungle Fever, they're yelling Jungle Fever and things like that. And
was that a biracial couple in the movie? I didn't see the movie.
Yeah, the Spike Lee movie, Jungle Fever, where a man was having an affair. A black man was having an affair with a woman who was white, in extramarital affair, that kind of thing. So, yeah. A couple of times we're in a grocery store and I'm taking she's paying and I'm taking groceries to the car. And the person says, "Wait a minute, those are her groceries." I'm like, "Yeah, that would actually be our groceries because like we're married and so, I mean, things like that." But
you got to learn to handle it with humor, right?
Yeah, you do. Because you just drive yourself nuts if you don't. And it's not like I went to this wedding where I met her and said, "Oh, I'm going to meet me a nice white woman this week." I mean, it just, I went to the wedding with no intention of meeting anybody. And she was there, and that started things off. We've been married 26 years now, so
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah.
So as a Catholic, you started this show kind of with, maybe you already answered the question, but what are Catholics to do with the race issue in America?
Yeah, let me say that I want to talk about a Catholic response to racism.
Okay. Yeah.
Because some people, I was speaking just recently, and they asked me to speak on a Catholic response to racism. And when I went through the Catholic response to racism, a person in the Q&A session was very angry because I didn't talk about politics. I didn't talk about, I didn't talk about reparations. I didn't talk about changing laws. I said a Catholic response to race, because it doesn't look like anybody else's response. All right. So here's the first thing I would say, Dr. Christine. We have to see past stereotypes and start to see people. Now, I alluded to that earlier, but what do I mean by that? We have to recognize within ourselves, okay, our own prejudices and racist attitudes. We have to acknowledge them. Yes, I have these. In fact, I was telling someone the other day, like if you see me or see a black person and you just all of a sudden get afraid, stop and ask yourself, why am I afraid? I don't know who this person is. Why am I afraid of them? And understand that you have that feeling, even if you don't know why it's there, and then really work hard to crucify that way of thinking,
yes.
And start to see the image and likeness of God in each other. First page of the Bible, Genesis 1:27, it says that we're made in God's image and likeness. And again, we have to see people the way God sees them, look at them through God's eyes. And know who did that amazingly well was Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, who took people from the sewers, literally from the garbage.
Filthy and they smelt.
And their limbs were falling off because of leprosy. They had all kinds of diseases, AIDS, whatever. And she brought them back to her hospice. And these people are going to die. I mean, they weren't miracle workers. They weren't nurses. They weren't going to nurse them back to health. But at least they can die with love. At least they can die with people praying for them and caring for them. They don't have to die alone. They don't have to die in their own urine. They don't have to die afraid. They're going to die knowing that somebody loved them. And to have, the moral fortitude to be able to do that, because when she looked at someone, she saw Jesus.
The image of God.
She saw Jesus in that person. And that's what we all need. So when I look at you as beautiful as you are, I don't want to say, oh man, look, she's hot, and start, the porn movie starts playing in the head. That's not,
That's
we
not God.
people of faith have to look at someone and see what God sees when he looks at them. A great example of this too, where we can draw a biblical example from this. Remember in 1 Samuel, God is displeased with Saul, so he sends Samuel to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem to anoint the new king of Israel. Now, Jesse has 8 sons.
8. Okay. Yeah, and it
but
was
he
a
only
lot.
brings out 7. Right? Because remember, David was outside. He left David outside
Tending the
with
sheep.
the sheep.
Yeah.
And so there was Eliab, Abinadab, Shammah, and 4 others. So Eliab is the first son. Samuel looks at him and goes, oh, look at this dude right here. This dude looks like a king.
Right.
And he goes to pour the oil of anointing. The Lord says, nope, not him. And he's confused. Like, I don't understand. I'm at the right house. There's Jesse. Here's the sons. What's the problem? And what the Lord says to Samuel is, look, you're looking at the outward appearance, his height, his stature. I don't care about that. The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance. The Lord looks on the heart. Because God cares what kind of person you are on the inside. He don't care what you look like on the outside. In fact, that's reinforced in the New Testament because there is no physical description of Jesus Christ. There's no what color he was, nothing, because it didn't matter. It didn't matter. He came to save everyone. And that's what we need to focus on. Looking interiorly at the person and not the exterior, to fight those prejudices and bias that we have within us, no matter how they got there. Another thing we could do, for example, at the parish level, we could appreciate the gift of cultural diversity. So if I'll use my own parish as an example. When I got to Immaculate Heart, we're a small parish, maybe 220 families, inner city Portland, very poor parish, but very culturally diverse. Half the parish is Vietnamese. Another third of the parish were Africans, and half were Vietnamese, and then of the other half of those were Africans, and then the other half were just a mix of different people.
Right.
White, black, all kinds of folks. And when I noticed that there was a separation amongst the 3 groups, if you will, they all kept to themselves, didn't mingle very much. For example, the Vietnamese, in order to keep their language and traditions, did their own RCIA, did their own youth group, did their own everything separate from the parish. And so I pointed this out to the pastor as someone new to the parish. I said, what's going on here? And so he put a plan in place. One of the things that we did, which was amazing, we did these potlucks. And so we just had these parish potlucks, and where we celebrated the cultural expressions and diversity of the ethnic cultures in our parish. And so people brought the Vietnamese food, they brought their African food, they brought the Filipino food, they brought the Croatian food, they brought their Irish food, and we had these potlucks, and each time we did it, a different group would take the lead. So we saw a Filipino dancing, and they explained the Filipino food, they explained the Filipino dress, then the Vietnamese and the Africans explained what they're wearing. And then, but here's the best part. People also began to tell their stories. They started to share their experience of what it was like to be a Catholic and a person of color. And so you heard it from the Vietnamese, from the different groups. And what that did was all the other groups said, hey, wait a minute. My experience is just kind of
similar
like that.
to yours.
Hey, wait a minute. My kids do the same crazy stuff. We have a lot in common here. And so it went over so well, Dr. Christine, that almost organically, the potlucks extended to birthdays, other parish celebrations, baptisms, graduations. We just started having these because everybody enjoyed being together. And if you have a parish that doesn't have a lot of diversity, fine, invite the parish down the street, the Hispanic parish or the Native American parish that has a culture.
Or here we've got a black church, a black Catholic church in Norfolk, and we've got the white church I belong to. Like white church, right? I think that would be a great idea to say we do, because I always sent my kids to Catholic school because I wanted the solid Catholic education. I wanted them to know Jesus, but I had said from the beginning, I hated the lack of diversity, and that there weren't that many blacks in the school. And I can still mention name by name the 2 black kids that went to my school as a Catholic girl growing up. That shouldn't be that way, right? But you're right. And so when people, I love what you said in the beginning about prejudice and racism. what you're mentioning is a lot of prejudice, and even that, it's an ignorant of all of us. Like, white people hang out with white people, black kids hang out with black kids, and I think it's all just familiarity. We want what we recognize because I'm just comfortable and I don't want to make an extra effort. Doesn't mean I don't like you, you don't like me. And to do what you're saying takes effort, takes action, takes making yourself uncomfortable. Not that I think you're a bad person, of whoever you are, of a different ethnicity, but because I'm going to have to actually listen and learn and go, so why do you guys do that? What kind of dances do you do? Or, you know what I mean? And once you get past that, you know, I'm always comfortable sitting with my own group. I think then you're right. You start seeing the heart, because I can't judge your heart if I don't know you. I can't. But if I start listening to you, I'm more comfortable. Like, my friends are pretty eclectic in terms of, you know, ethnicity and stuff, because I just like the Jesus freaks. No offense to any of you watching here, you know, but I'm most comfortable with people who just want to talk about God all day like I do. And so those are the ones I find I'm hanging out with. My daughter, once we had I don't know, what was it? A Christmas party, whatever. And I had people that were in Girl Scouts with me, people went to church with me, people I met from Starbucks, like a barista and stuff. And she's like, she had to be like 10 or 11. She goes, you sure have a lot of different circles. You're like, you have some nerds and you have some jocks and you have some whatever. And she noticed as a young girl, all the different groups. And I hadn't even really noticed that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But they all love Jesus. So it was kind of fun. I don't know. It opened my eyes.
You said something very important. You talk about getting uncomfortable. And what's our image is people of faith right here.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If we're going to take our lives to the next level, we got to get uncomfortable.
So much.
Jesus was uncomfortable on the cross.
I love the way you did that.
You know, he was uncomfortable. And we have to get uncomfortable if we want to take our life, our relationships, our faith to that next level. Because what happens, Dr. Christine, when we get comfortable, we get lazy.
Yes, we do. I'm the first one to admit it, because I do. I'm tired. I got my grandkids. I got to do my own thing. But I do like the idea that you made me think about. You know, maybe we should partner up with St. Mary's in Norfolk, which is a predominantly Black church, with like our rich white church, right? I just think it is always so beautiful to hear. For instance, here's the thing that a lot of white people don't know. I mean, I know this not because I've talked to so many of my Black friends and doing this series. I mean, how many white people have to tell their children, now when you walk into a store and you see cameras, make sure you never put your hands in your pockets. If you touch something off the shelf, you put it back on the shelf and then put your hands down. And I'm like, I never had to teach my kid that. Every single one of my Black female friends said, I teach my kids that. I'm like, that's sad. Yeah. Driving while Black. You can have this argument. One of the things that bothers me, and I'd love your perspective on this, one of the things that bothers me is people saying, and I agree, you know, don't fight the cops and they're not going to shoot you in the back, right? But what a lot of my white friends don't understand is, yeah, but a lot of these Black people, friends, whatever, have learned that even if you don't fight, there's not a lot of justice, that Black people are picked up and found guilty for things a white person wouldn't, even if they don't fight. So they've kind of, well, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't, so I may as well at least try to fight it. Am I wrong on that? What's your perspective on that? You know what I'm talking about with don't resist the cops.
So let me say a few things. Let's just dive into the law enforcement piece now. So I truly believe that law enforcement practices need to be reevaluated. During my 23 year in law enforcement public safety, I served in various leadership positions. I was president of the Western Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators. I was in the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals because my area of specialization was anti-terrorism. And I was teaching at the police academy. I was teaching a class called Contemporary Threat Assessment Methodology, where I taught police officers and first responders how to identify and respond to threats of terrorism. I trained at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I trained in Quantico at the FBI Academy. And from 2002 to 2008, 2 successive governors appointed me to the board of the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. That's the organization here in Oregon that provides training and resources for all police officers for the entire state. And so I am very intimately familiar with how police officers are trained. But since you brought up the traffic stop, let's go there. So all police officers are taught to do traffic stops the same. Okay. And it's an officer safety issue. Like when I was in the academy, the first day of when they taught traffic stops, they sat us down, they showed us a film, and they showed us films of the police officer walking to the car, the roll down the window. Hello, can I have driver's license, registration, proof of insurance? And before they even finish, boom, 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 shots are being fired out of the car against the officer. They show those over and over again. Why? The lesson is there's no such thing as a routine traffic stop. So just because you're pulling someone over because the tail light is out, just you have to have a certain caution. But here's the thing: the biases and prejudices that we talked about before, even police officers have those. And the problem is those aren't identified or trained out in the training process of police officers. So you have a police officer who may have these biases, prejudices against a Black person, but they're training to implement police procedures the same way as everybody else. The problem is this: when they get out into the street and they're taking the techniques that they learned and they're applying them in the real world, what the layer on top of that are the biases and prejudices that they have before they even got to the academy. So we haven't done a good job from the law enforcement side to identify and call those things out within the person so that the police officer can in the academy recognize, oh my goodness, I have these biases, prejudice, that I recognize that, and now I have to treat this person the way I would treat any other traffic stop or any other situation I find myself in. Because I can tell you, police officers are not trained to kneel on people's necks. They're not trained to shoot people in the back. That's not what they're trained to do. And so there's definitely something going on there. There's something else going on that definitely needs to be looked at.
Oh, you mean the race issues going on? I mean something else besides that, like the demonic that we're talking about. I think
there's some biases and prejudice, and even some racism there that definitely needs to be addressed and looked at. Again, because I think one of the solutions, for instance, is like neighborhood policing. You know how police used to be in neighborhoods
officer friendly
and get to know the businesses, know the people. If your son wasn't acting right, you call hey, Officer Tim, can you come over and just talk to my son and have that conversation? Because now they're invested. They know the people. They're invested in the neighborhood. And the things, like I said, we fear what we don't understand. We fear what we don't understand. So even the police officers have biases and prejudices. And so they're going to approach a Black person or a Hispanic person maybe differently than a white person, but it shouldn't be that way. It should be a situational assessment and analysis, not a color assessment and analysis.
It's funny because what's in my mind is, when I'm sure you guys do those, you're going to the crime scene and some guy runs up, you shoot or you don't shoot, and they pop up the things. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So if they have they should film them and see how many times a white guy in a hoodie comes by or a Black guy in a hoodie, and see, are your impulses to shoot the Black guy in the hoodie more than the white guy in the hoodie, right? So then you can film it and go, oh, I shot at the Black guy in the hoodie 6 more times than the white guy in the hoodie, and it's all staged, just to kind of let that person see, it does exist, same exact scenarios. I mean, have you talked with them about different things to do, or you just tell them it needs to be done?
Well, no, there's several different things. First of all, I think I think encourage people to go on a ride along. Many agencies offer ride alongs. You just sign a waiver. It doesn't cost anything. You go out there, you can ride with the officer, for an entire shift and just see what they do and how they respond every day. And like you said, there's also citizen academies where you can actually go through this kind of shoot, don't shoot scenario as a private citizen. So the officer will explain to you how you're supposed to do a traffic stop. And like, here's one scenario that we did once. So we explained to the citizen, and because this was somebody that's kind of anti-police, so we brought him to the Citizens Academy. And so another police officer was playing the bad guy. He happened to be white. So he's driving. So the officer pulls him over. He gets out of the car, and now the driver of the other car gets out and starts walking toward the officer, which you never want to have happen. So the person says, "Stop, stop, stop," and the person's not stopping. They reach into their pocket. Now I don't know if they're reaching for their license or reaching for a weapon. So I said, "Well, he's reaching for something. What are you gonna do?" And the citizen is like, "Do it my taser? Do it my gun?" And then boom, 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 boom. You're dead. You're dead. You're not going home to your family tonight. Why'd you hesitate? Well, I just wasn't sure if he was reaching for this. I wasn't sure if he was reaching for, I wasn't sure. I said, see, this is what an officer has to deal with every day. And their whole perspective just went whoop. And they're like, holy cow, I didn't realize that that this was this much pressure and how quick you have to make decisions about things. And I think those kinds of things and those kinds of scenarios can be improved at the academy level for police. I mean, even the Police Executive Research Forum says that officers should be trained to recognize the inherent dignity of every human person. Right?
Yeah.
What does that sound like to you? That's the Catholic principle. Well, we
It is
just
a
talked
Catholic.
about that.
Right.
You know, so there are definitely things that we can do to improve training.
You know, we could talk about the police, we could talk about politics. I'm, let me just stick with Catholicism here. So as a Black man, Catholics are mostly white. Is that true or is it not true? Because I know like in Africa, it is highly Catholic. And God, that's beautiful. Have you ever been to Africa, by the
I
way?
have.
Oh,
I've spoken on a speaking tour for 2 weeks in South Africa.
oh, I loved it. I was in Uganda, I was in Tanzania. And they have so much more of a wide open faith because it's not hindered by judgment, by the media, by stuff. And anyway, so obviously in Africa, where most people have dark skin, you're going to have mostly dark skinned Catholics. But in America, it seems like Catholics are mostly white people. And so as a Black Catholic, do you find people, do you find that to be people noticing that you like stand out or not really?
Well, the thing
Because
is,
I'm in the
it's
South.
interesting.
So Catholics in the South, they're like, they think we're heathens. We're all going to hell.
Well, the thing is this, I'm a full-time speaker and author. And, there's very few Black Catholic men. I mean, like Deacon Larry Oney and a few others that are doing this on a full-time basis that are Black and Catholic. But I've had tremendous success, not because necessarily I'm Black, but it's the message.
God, the
I'm just a
message.
deliverer of the message.
Yeah.
It's just like a concert, right? Jesus is the musician. I'm just the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to be a beautiful, well-tuned instrument in the hands of our Lord. But here's the thing, and I'm going to say this. People ask me, well, you're a Black Catholic. Well, I'm a Catholic who's Black. And here's why I say this, because I'm Catholic first. My faith in Jesus Christ comes first. That's not denying my Black heritage, my Caribbean heritage. I'm an immigrant. We're first generation to come to the United States. I'm not denying any of that. But what I'm saying, when I die and stand before Jesus Christ, he's not going to ask me how Black I am. He's going to ask me, I gave you talents. What did you do with the talents I gave? Did you bury them in the ground, or did you use them for my glory? I gave you the gift of the diaconate. I gave you the gift of fatherhood. I gave you the gift of being a husband. What did you do with those talents? That's going to be what I'm going to be held accountable for, not my color. But again, not to negate that, but I use my gift of my Blackness in my Catholicism. So when I'm preaching, people say, you sound like a Protestant. I'm like, no, I sound like a Catholic who's in love with Jesus Christ. That's what I sound like.
Yes. Yes.
But they said something sound like a preacher, like a Black preacher. I said, well, but listen to the message. It's thoroughly 100% Catholic. So,
yeah. I've been saying to my Black friends lately, I said, you have an advantage because you have that color skin. And they've been doing one of these, like, what? Because I've been told my whole life white is the color to be. I said, because you were given that skin color for such a time as this. If you say this right now, it's more important or more heard than if I say, because I'm a white person. So God has said, I'm going to give you that color skin. I'm going to give you those experiences because one day, then your voice will be heard and you will teach them how to love me in ways that someone else can't. So thank you for that color skin, right? That's what you're supposed to say to God. Thank you for this. And you're right. This is a Catholic show. It all comes down to this. That's why I say in the racism all the time. Love one another. And to love means to get to know them, love them, serve them, try to be selfless towards someone. Give them the gospel. That's love. That's Catholic. I should just want to get you to heaven.
Amen.
That's it.
That's it.
And if I do that, then race isn't going to be an issue because I'm going to want to get you to heaven, whether you have dark skin, light skin, red hair, no hair. No offense to you, Deacon.
No, none taken.
Right? So, yeah, I love that you said our Catholicism should be first. I'm a daughter of the Most High God, and I'm going to have to answer to him. And I'm going to have to say how I treated people, how I judged people or didn't. And I think the message is we need to focus on that and tell everybody, are you seeing them as Christ would see them? Like you said at the beginning of the show.
Yeah,
Right.
what you did to the least of my brothers and sisters, you did to me. That's the
Yeah.
lesson there. I think another thing we need to do is put God back into society. I mean, we've almost removed God completely from the public square. And when you remove God, you make room for the devil. So because we've stopped seeing each other being made in the image likeness of God, so what we've done instead, we're trying to remake God
To
into
our image.
our image and likeness. Remember, that was a danger in Genesis 3:5. You will be like God. You don't need God because you're your own God, right? That's
Yeah.
exactly where we are in our culture. Look at the religious persecution that's going on all around the world. The violence, the racial riots, and
Anarchy.
so-called
Politics. Yeah.
so-called redefinition of marriage and redefinition of human sexuality. All these different things are going on. What's going on in China? All
Turning
these
against
different
God.
things. And we Catholics can no longer allow this secular culture and ideology with its subjective relativistic truth to dictate the pace. Because often what happens, let's be honest, often what happens is that there's an issue that comes up and we Catholics kind of just like, we don't want to talk about it, or we're reticent, or we
We're
don't speak out
private
loud
about
enough.
our faith.
Yeah, and then a law passes, like the Obermefell, marriage thing for the
Yeah.
Supreme Court. All of a sudden, everybody gets upset. We issue statements. It's too late.
Yes, you were
It's too late.
supposed to open your mouth and fight before it
With,
happened.
with this issue, you know why, Dr. Christine, why I think we're seeing all the rioting and the looting and the vandalism going on right now with regard to race? Because there's no leadership
Yes.
in this area. Back in the 50s and 60s, we had Martin Luther King. In South Africa, there was
Nelson
Nelson
Mandela.
Mandela. Now, I mean, there's nobody, not a national figure, someone that we can say, here's someone we can rally around. Here's someone that we're drawn to. Here's someone that
Here's
gets
a
the message,
leader that we would
who's
like to
cutting,
follow. Yeah.
who's cutting through the rhetoric and getting to the point and actually come up with solutions. There's nobody. So with that leadership void, it's being filled in with the anarchists and all the other people that are just trying to, have other agendas that have nothing to do with race, that are going there and basically causing trouble. We Catholics have to stand against that. We have an opportunity right now as the church, and it can Catholic Church, Protestant Church, as the church, believers in Jesus Christ, to
Capital
take the
C.
lead on this issue, to dictate the pace to the rest of the secular culture. And we're not doing it to the extent that we should be.
One of the things, so if we move off of race, because race just attaches to all this, into our Catholicism, you think about the exactly what you just said. If we put the God question first, everything else irons out, because we have like in Arkansas, where they're putting the satanic statue, the Baphomet, right next to the Ten Commandments. They just took down all these statues of the Confederates, which, sorry if you're watching, I'm a Northerner, I'm really happy about that, but I don't need to see, anyway, it's another thing. But they're replacing them. People are starting to put images up that shouldn't be up, and never ever before was a satanic black mass public until like this century. And so now we're really seeing it is Satan, and he's becoming more obvious and more bold, and he doesn't care about who he destroys: white persons, black persons, women, men, children. And so our Catholicism, you're right, has to be standing up for the defenseless. So when I grew up, my mom always said, my mother was abused by her father for many years, and then when she told, sexually abused, when she told and it got public, they beat her up, her parents, for lying, because obviously, so they put her in a girls' home for troubled girls. And my mother used to always pray that if she prayed to the Blessed Virgin, because she didn't think men could be good back then, so a male God couldn't be good. She said, if I'm ever so blessed as to have children, I will never let a day go by where I don't tell them I love them. And I'm so grateful for her suffering was turned, and I always know I'm loved. Because of that, though, my mother used to, so we lived, I always say, my dad gets offended when I say this, that we lived in the ghetto because they're all black, but we had the one street, it was literally just a 2-block street that cut off into a dead end that had mostly white people in it. But there was one black family that lived, the Whitsons, down the street. And my mother used to invite them over for dinner. And, you know, we had always, it was just fun, family, right? But my mother learned, she said, if you ever see someone who is defenseless, someone who is getting picked on or bullied, I don't care if you know them or not. I don't care what they look like. You, my kid, you better go to their defense. So I know every mom and dad gives their kid a different narrative in their household. And some people's narrative is you better cover your back because nobody else is going to cover it, you know. But that was the narrative in our house, is you always defend the defenseless. And so when it comes to race, people with Down syndrome or the nerds, it's almost in my DNA to come alongside of them because of my mom, but you think it was because of the cross she carried that made her that kind of person. So really, to be Catholic is carrying our cross, but how can our cross make us a better person, a better Christian, and get us to heaven faster, you know?
Yeah, and I think that the key to what you just said, for me, scripturally, is the Good Samaritan. Right, because the Samaritans and the Jews, you know, didn't like each other, even though they were neighboring peoples. There was
each other.
Tremendous hostility between the two of them. And so when Jesus tells the parable, the priest walks by. Now, this is another Jewish man who's been beat up. The priest walks by, doesn't want to defile himself ritually. The Levite walks by, doesn't defile himself ritually. But, you know, at least they could have called somebody for help. They didn't even do that. And who walks by Samaritan, the outsider, who was presumed by the Jews to have nothing of God's spirit or compassion? He was the one who reached out in love to the person lying on the side of the road. Now, you want to say to yourself, what would you have done in that situation? Oh, I would have been a Samaritan. I would have helped him. Really? Yeah. You know, what if the almost half dead guy was the guy who raped you? What if it was the guy who kidnapped your daughter and put her in sex trafficking? What if it was one of the police officers involved in one of the, like, George Floyd killing or something? So as we walk by the side of the road, and the anger and the hatred that we feel, you feel it welling up inside of you, and you want more than anything else for that person to suffer and to even die. And you just leave them lying there saying, you deserve it, and not even give them a second thought. That's what the instinct tells you to do. But the Lord tells us that we must be good Samaritans. We're all sinners in need of God's mercy. We all have to recognize that we have personal sin, and that we will be held accountable for that sin. But Jesus teaches us that despite the fact we are sinners, we have the attitude that you just said, Dr. Christine, which you said so beautifully and so eloquently, that we need to walk alongside people. In other words, we need to be the Samaritan in the lives of our brothers and sisters here and now.
That's the Catholic. That's the Catholic. The universal body of Christ, the bride of Christ, treating and I love the example you use, because I think most of us, you're right, are like, oh no, I'd have done differently. Same of us going, well, if Jesus was there, I wouldn't have wanted him crucified. Well, hopefully not, right? But we see ourselves with so much more grace than we see others. But when you're right, when you say that person who you love least, and I use the examples like you, but you even better, you know, the sex traffickers, the terrorists, the extremists who'd blow your head off. If we can really put those persons in there, you know what I use, which is so funny, I don't even have to be that radical. I say, how about your ex-wife or your ex-husband? And how many people have such
it's getting real now, huh?
Right? Because like, I love people. I'm like, well, how come you don't love your ex-wife? Why do you treat her with, well, other marriages can be resolved, but not mine. Let's dig into that one. And I'm hit a real soft spot with people, because if you could lay in bed and make love to a person and then hate them, what's the difference?
Yeah.
What's the difference? You're the same person. That's the same person. All that's changed is here. How I see you and how I think about you. And we have a choice how we see people and how we think about them. You know? Yes,
exactly. You know, one of the people that inspires me is Father Augustus Tolton, who was the first Black priest in the United States. And he experienced tremendous racism and animosity and prejudice. Every seminary in the United States rejected him because he was Black. Every single one.
Wow.
And but Rome took him, the Vatican took him, trained to be a priest, and sent him back to the United States. In fact, back to the town that he grew. Well, he was born a slave, escaped the Underground Railroad with his mother, to Quincy, Illinois. And even there, he was the white priest told the white parishioners, because he accepted everybody to his parish. He didn't care what color they were. But the white priest said to the white parishioners, if you go to his parish, it doesn't count for your Sunday obligation. You know, it just, you know, why did he stay in the church? Simply this: he was able to discern what so many of us fail to perceive today, that what the church actually teaches is true and good and beautiful, despite the people in the church who are hypocrites and who live in a way that's contradictory to what the church actually, to the faith that they profess. And we have to remember, focus on the teachings, not the people, because we're all sinners in need of God's mercy.
You know, I don't try to find a way to bring my book into the show, but you know, where is it? Did I have it here? Thought I had my book. Oh, here it is. Look, that's bad TV. I've been down, right? I should have had it on the table. The super couples. So I interviewed extremely happily married couples to find out, was there a formula? Because I, you know, hated my own husband and I just wanted him to die, and it was awful because the marriage was so bad in my mind. And I kept thinking, are super couples made, or are they accidental? I thought for sure they were accidental. You just got lucky, marriage of 1 in a million. But I found out there was actually a formula. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I started seeing it. I was convicted, and I started practicing that formula in my own marriage. And then my husband started practicing it back, not realizing he was a victim of marital guinea pig, you know? So when we started practicing the super couple formula, our marriage went from unhappy to happy to very happy. It was tremendous. Well, the formula is sacred, SACRED. And what I have done is I have realized that same formula is so I teach classes on the super customer service rep. I use the sacred formula. The super leader, I use the sacred formula. Do you know, Deacon, that formula is not just for an extremely happy marriage. Is to be a Christian, you must practice the sacred formula. What is it? S, selflessness. That is the capstone of what Christ did. You give yourself, surrender your needs for the needs of the other. If that person's Black and you're white, Good Samaritan, you know, I want you to put that person's needs before your own. The A is attentiveness. You can unhappy marriages pay attention to what their spouse does poorly. Super marriages pay attention to what their spouse does well. It doesn't mean that they're not the same person, but I'm going to look at you and I'm going to choose to focus. I'll see your negatives, but I'm going to focus on your goods. If I'm dealing with someone of a different color, different ethnicity, what do I pay attention to? The areas that they failed in, the way that we're different, or do I pay attention to the ways that we're the same and the goodness in their heart? C is communication. You and I both touched on that. We both do it for a living. Talk. You've got to communicate. There's difference between male brain and female brain. Well, even our cultures teach us, you know, different communication strategies. Some cultures, Black churches, if you can say, hands in the air and loud, right? And white churches, very, well, why do they do that? Are they not loving God? Are they too emotional? Well, why don't you ask them? Because if we can bring both parts, the reverence of the quiet prayer and the passion of the loud prayer, it's a beautiful thing. The R is respect. If I respect your differences, if I respect the image that you are made in the image and likeness of God, I respect the humanity that is Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers, right? And vice versa. E is encouragement, you know, just, yeah, if anybody can do this, Deacon, you can do this. So we encourage one another, and encouragement's biblical. And then the last part is what this show is all about, deliberateness. None of us is going to be Christ-like accidentally. We have to work at it. We have to deliberately choose selflessness, attentiveness, communication, respect, encouragement. And so, you know, I'm like, God, only you, God, could come up with a formula and make the acronym sacred, you know? That's how we need to live. We need to live sacred lives. Don't you think?
That is so true.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do because, you know, the temptation of the world is to pull you in and get you sucked in to a way of thinking and acting that's antithetical. But no, I love that sacred, and it's really easy to remember, but harder to put into practice. So just like anything else, you have to work at it. Marriage is work. And the more work you put into something and you start to see those results, the more satisfied you are because you know how hard you work to get there.
Yeah, you did. I have two, for the sake of time, two statements, and one's a fill in the blank. I'm going to ask you a question, you answer them. First one is a fill in the blank. When I die, I will know I had been a success if.
God looks at me and says, well done, good and faithful servant. Now come and enter into your master's joy.
That's awesome. I get that a lot. That's it. Just tell me I did a good job. Second statement. Name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
To really work hard to be the Samaritan. Simple.
Okay, yeah. Make ourselves uncomfortable, step outside, and we have to envision Samaritan to no matter who it is, right? I mean,
Yes,
that ex-spouse.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
That person who hurt you, raped your child. You know, the one that you are least likely to love, I guess, right?
Yes. Amen.
You have been a true blessing, and I'm so grateful. Maybe next time I can get you and your wife. I've never met her, so I need to get her on the air too. Is she shy?
Yes.
Oh, that's just like me. I'm the talker.
That's why we never do anything together, because she's like, no, I want to stay in the background, you know. So.
Oh my gosh, my husband and I used to go to all the Catholic dinners and dances and stuff, and so Danny so me and Danny are you and your wife. I'm like the whoo, and he's like, and so we had another couple that would always join us up in there. Bob was always the wild one, and Regina was always like this. So we kind of had a family agreement. We're at these church dances. Well, Bob and I would dance together, and Regina and Danny would sit at the table.
Yeah.
We even won a dance contest. It was a 50s dance contest. Me and Bob. It's like, yeah. So funny. Yeah. Great. So no, I understand. She doesn't want to be on the air. Tell her she's welcome anyway. But,
I will. Thank you.
For the sake of time, we have to close. And I just want to say to all my viewers, go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. You can find this show, watch this again. And if you're having a hard time with the conversation on racism, let Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers do the talking for you. Deacon, before I go off, how can people find you?
Simple. The website is deaconharold.com. Everything goes there. Yeah. That
is so easy. And is there anything that you're working on, any project you want to push right now? I know COVID's got us all sitting still.
Yeah, I wish. I mean, there were pilgrimages coming up. They all got canceled. So I'm actually working on a book on the service ministry of the deacon right now. But really, I have no other projects coming up right now. I'm just
so hire you to speak.
Scenes. Yeah.
So
there's a few places coming up. Going to be speaking. I'm going to be in Legatus next week down in Lafayette, Louisiana. Then I'm going to be in near Rochester, New York, Leroy, New York, and then I'm speaking in Des Moines, Iowa.
Gosh, that's great.
Yeah. So.
I'm not speaking anywhere because I didn't think that they were hiring people to.
Yeah, so many, because I usually travel every week. I travel about 250,000 miles a year, and I'm not even going to hit 100,000 miles, not even close this year. But so there are a few places. In fact, some of these places canceled and then came back and said, well, actually, we're going to do it. We're going to do like smaller crowd with live streaming and different things. So it just depends on the diocese and the country. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good. That makes me feel better because I know you got to feed your family. There is that. Mm-hmm. So, oh my gosh. Well, you guys have been watching Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers with me. Look him up. He is the dynamic deacon, and I think you should bring him into your parish. He is a God-fearing man. He's a Catholic man. He loves the Lord, wants to go to heaven, wants to get you there too. So if you need a speaker at your next engagement, bring him in. And if you don't want him, bring me. I'm just messing with you. Yes. But we have to go off the air. So I just want to say again, go to breakfastwithbacon.com, go follow all of our social media links, Instagram, Facebook, Parler. This is YouTube. All my shows are on YouTube. It's a new channel. Please go and subscribe. I'm so excited about that, and share these shows with your friends. But until then, I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I want to remind you always to live your life sunny side up.